Warning, the following video contains some spoilers for the One Piece franchise. You have been warned. Also, there's both the anime and the live-action Netflix show. I will be using footage from both as the B-roll for this video. Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily focus on Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And if you want to help me out, I have a Patreon and Discord, more info at the end of the video. And welcome back to Inspired Campaigns, where I talk about how to make a Pathfinder campaign inspired by various pop culture franchises. So, One Piece. Love it or hate it, no one can argue that this anime hasn't been successful. This show about fantasy pirates in a fantasy world is still going on after over 25 years as of the posting of this video and over 1,000 anime episodes. This show is crazy. And there are some people out there who want to play a One Piece game with their tabletop group. There are several fan-made supplements in this world for D&D 5th edition and a few YouTube actual plays with popular YouTubers playing it. So with the second season of the live-action One Piece show recently out, let's look into how you could convert One Piece into Pathfinder2e. Side note, I've had this video scripted for about a year and things just lined up for me to release it this month. Okay, just to give this video some structure, I'm going to start off talking about the basics of the One Piece world, which is all lore stuff. Stuff that doesn't involve any game mechanics, but you'll need to know to understand the world. Then I'll discuss how you could handle races, or what Pathfinder would call ancestries of the world. Then I'll talk about the power system in One Piece and how one could relate that to character classes that would exist in the world. Next, we can discuss weapons, armor, and equipment that would be available, and then any optional or house rules to include. Finally, I'll have a review at the end. Now, I will start in on how I'd make a One Piece world in Pathfinder, but before I do, I need to remind everyone to make sure that your players are okay with this game before running it. Don't just spring it on your players. This kind of campaign will involve limiting some player options, so make sure everyone is on board with that before diving into a One Piece game. Okay, so here's the setup for the One Piece world. Keep in mind that the series has been going on for over a quarter century, so I'm going to have to do a lot of abbreviating and oversimplifying. There are other YouTube videos out there with a much more in-depth review of the world if interested. This is just going to be an oversimplified overview. With that understood, let's talk about the world of One Piece. So the story of One Piece takes place on this planet, which is mostly a series of archipelagos and islands. Whole lot of ocean, not a lot of land. Now there's a reason for that, didn't used to be like that, it's not important for the overview, we're moving on. Anyway, because there are little islands everywhere, sea travel is a huge deal in One Piece. It's just the only way to get anywhere. Now there is one continent on One Piece, the Red Line, which is a landmass ringing the world north to south, more about that later. But other than that, little in the way of large bits of land. Around the center of the world east to west is the Grand Line, essentially the tropics of the world. Now, the Grand Line is dangerous. Within the Grand Line, there are a series of islands like the rest of the world, but due to the island's strange magnetic something or other, their weather is all wonky and weird. Thus, you can have a perpetual snow island in the tropics. And because of all the magnetic MacGuffin stuff, normal compasses don't work. And there are currents that will occasionally blast your ship up into the sky. And there are also giant sea beasts, can't forget them. Also, all of the most powerful criminals in the world flock there because of a rumored pirate treasure. And because there's a lot of pirate activity, there's a lot of patrols from the military. More on that in a bit. Point being, Grand Line, very dangerous. Surrounding the Grand Line on either side are the calm belts, which are doldrums, or places where the wind rarely blows. So sailing into and out of the Grand Line is nearly impossible. Also, more sea monsters there. There is one way to get into the Grand Line, though. This area called Reverse Mountain. This area allows ships to travel up a waterfall and then they are spit out into the Grand Line. A ship can then start sailing the Grand Line going this direction. Because of this, the hardest place to reach in the world is located directly behind Reverse Mountain because, you'd have to sail up a waterfall, down into the Grand Line with all the weird weather and sea beasts and stuff, sail halfway around the world, somehow get through the back end of the Red Line here, there is a way to do it, but it's tricky, then halfway around the world again. So this location, somewhere around here, is probably where the greatest pirate in One Piece probably stashed his treasure some 20-odd years ago. That's the treasure of Gol D. Roger. Not Gold Roger, Gol space D space Roger. Anyway, he left his treasure there 20 years ago and left it all in one piece, so his treasure started to be known as the One Piece. Title drop. Oh, and yes, all of this is much more complicated than I'm talking about. Remember, this is all extremely abbreviated. But yes, the One Piece is not just some treasure, it's much more than that. So the bulk of the show has the main cast, that is to say Luffy and his pirate crew, sailing around and fighting other pirates and the Marines looking for the One Piece. By the way, in this world, the Marines are the military branch of the world government. Yeah, there's a world government in One Piece, and they are complicated. For sure, there are Marines like Kobe and Fujitora here who want to protect civilians and help people. But the world government is run by these terrible people called the Celestial Dragons, who are quite literally above the law. Like, seriously, they can just declare someone a slave and bam, they're a slave. Oh, and they can just murder in cold blood, and not only is it legal for them, most of the Marines will bend over backwards to follow their decrees. Listen, in the world of One Piece, if someone simply strikes a Celestial Dragon, the Marines will send a fleet of ships and a Navy admiral with honest-to-God superpowers to that location to unalive the offender and anyone even remotely connected to them. So yeah, there's a lot of adventure to be had in the One Piece world. You could fight the giant monsters, other pirates, the world government, the Marines, lots of room for adventure. I will have to say, if you want to have a true One Piece game, the show is fairly political. I mean, it's not like directly political. No one is supporting liberal or conservative parties, but it more shows that anyone with power can be corrupt and evil or use their power for good. There are good and evil pirates, but also good and evil government officials, and the true enemy is greed, corruption, and unethical systems of power, not conservatism or liberalism. Now, there's a huge amount of stuff that we don't know, and also a lot of stuff I skipped over, like these poneglyphs here. They belong to an unnamed nation and recorded their history, but also, like, no one can read their language because it was wiped off the map along with the country. But that's all you need to know for the basics of a One Piece game. Now to get into how to actually play One Piece in Pathfinder, starting with what kind of ancestries would be available in a One Piece Pathfinder game? Well, that's an interesting question. See, One Piece only has humans, kinda, sorta. In the world of One Piece, humans are much more varied than they are in the real world or in Pathfinder. Big Mom here is 880 centimeters or almost 29 feet tall, and she's human. Her daughter, Pudding, is 166 centimeters or 5'5". So, like I said, lots of variation. And it may be the case that different ancestries, like these fishermen here, we'll talk about them in a second, are just further diversified humans, but that's up for debate. Anyway, it seems like Big Mom is the exception to the rule, and most One Piece humans are, roughly the size of real-life humans. But there are also other options out there. There are both fishmen and mer people who are actually the same species, I think, just some expressed with fish bodies but are bipedal, and some are humans with fish tails. Anyway, fishmen could be represented by the Pathfinder ancestry of Athamaru or Azerketi, and merfolk by, well, merfolk. Next up are Sky Islanders, humans with wings. There's actually 3 subcategories of Sky Islanders, but they aren't really that different from each other biologically. I don't think Sky Islanders can fly with their wings, but if you wanted to represent them as flyers, you could use the Strix ancestry. Minks are humans who have developed animal-like appearances, so you could just either use the awakened animal ancestry or the beast conversal heritage for them. Either that or there are specific animal ancestries you could use for specific animals like catfolk, ratfolk, Starfinder's Vlaka, just to name a few. There is another subrace of humans called Tontata. Their translation is dwarves, but they are absolutely tiny, so I would use the sprite ancestry to represent them. They typically don't have wings, not without external modification, so maybe block off any wing feats if you wanted to go that route. There are also just large humans, so Jotunborn wouldn't go amiss as well. The last ancestry we have easy stats for are the Oni humans, who all have horns and universally seem to be pretty big, with the shortest one I've seen on screen being 263 centimeters or 8'8". I would just reflavor the Minotaur ancestry for them. I know they don't look like Minotaurs, but they're big and they have a horn attack, so There are also a few more ancestries that might be available as one-offs. Rook here is a living skeleton as the result of how his devil fruit works. More about devil fruits in a second. This lady here ate a science experiment and it turned her into essentially a centaur, and there are a few others. So yeah, if you wanted to play another ancestry as like the only one of your kind, you could probably work something out with your GM. Now there are some other ancestries in One Piece that don't have great Pathfinder equivalents for player characters, notably the giant race who are like gargantuan plus sized. I mean, they're larger than 20 by 20. And also there are the long arm, long leg, and snake neck tribes who are, well, you see them on screen. If you think of a good way to run them in Pathfinder, let me know. There are also rare races like the Lunarians who would be absolutely busted if they were a playable ancestry because they are all but invincible. Now, before we get to Pathfinder classes that would work well in a One Piece game, let's talk about the powers available in the lore of One Piece. So there are sort of three systems of special power in One Piece, and that's where we run into our first major problem. See, One Piece doesn't have magic, at least not in the Pathfinder sense. And since Pathfinder is kind of predicated on having magic in the party, not having actual spellcasters could be a problem. Now, originally in the script I went into One Piece's power system in detail, but I realized that wasn't necessary. Really, One Piece's power system boils down to the idea that there are three ways for a person in One Piece to gain special abilities: physicality, hockey, and devil fruits. To start off, people in One Piece can achieve higher levels of physicality than in the real world, with people being so strong that they can, like, slice the air and the resulting wind currents will cut a ship in half. Secondly, there is a form of spiritual energy called Haki, or what Pathfinder calls Chi, that would let someone strengthen their body or armaments, increasing both offense and defense. This spiritual awareness can also allow people to predict their opponent's moves, and some can use it to inspire fear or even knock out opponents. Finally, there is what the show is most known for: devil fruits. If someone eats a devil fruit, they gain a superpower, but become powerless and unable to swim in water, and with a world covered in oceans, that's a big problem. Oh, and before you ask, if you eat 2 devil fruits you die, and no, you cannot split a devil fruit between multiple people. There are a few other strange abilities in One Piece. Frankie here is a cyborg with several abilities that you could reflavor as spells, so maybe like a Magus. This girl can hypnotize people by drawing colored runes on them, even if they don't see those runes, I think. And this guy has such expert control over his chi that he can animate his hair and have it attack people. Now, these abilities do border on magic, but none of them have as deep a bag of tricks as Pathfinder's spell lists, so it's still kind of hard to justify full-on wizards and clerics in One Piece. Hey guys, Editor Cyprime here. I've thought of a few more magic-adjacent things that happen in One Piece, like performances that are able to make people fall asleep or hallucinate. Also, there's a doctor that does not have a devil fruit that turned someone into a frog guy once, so there's some more magic adjacent stuff that can happen in this series. However, not all is lost. For example, there is a martial arts form in One Piece that focuses on enhanced physicality and could be represented by kineticists. This martial art allows users to fly by kicking the air, and they can also kick the air hard enough to make wind gusts. You could maybe represent that as a reflavored air kineticist. Another martial art allows people to project water at high speed, so maybe a water kineticist. That hockey spiritual energy stuff can be represented by certain abilities, like amongst chi spells or an exemplar's spiritual energy damage. What's this mean for classes that would work in One Piece? Well, most martial classes, like a fighter, most barbarians, rogues, investigators, they are all fine. Inventor and gunslinger would also work, as guns and cool inventions are somewhat common in One Piece. Alchemist, especially a chirurgeon, would also likely be fun, as there are bombs and healing poultices in the series. But when it comes to magic-based classes, if you want to keep to One Piece's lore, I might stick to kineticist. Like I said, you might be able to reflavor, say, a Magus into a cyborg with your spells being inventions, but you'd have to work that out with your GM. No one is casting the Wish ritual though, so this would be a low magic game despite the wacky hijinks. If your players wanted to be a person who ate a devil fruit, a few more options open up. There are devil fruits that let you turn into animals, so the lycanthrope archetype would be available. Charlotte Oven here ate a devil fruit that allows him to heat things up if he touches them, so maybe fire kineticist. This guy ate a devil fruit that lets him summon a genie to attack people, so summoner, maybe? But like I said, full-on spellcaster might not fit with the lore of the world. Now, you might think that playing a game without a spellcaster isn't possible in Pathfinder, but it is. An alchemist, especially a chirurgeon, can provide a decent amount of healing, as can a forensic investigator with the medic archetype. You might be more limited in your options, but it's not impossible. Just make sure, as a GM, you are taking your players' limitations into account when designing encounters. For example, don't send your party against a Barghest because no one will be able to counteract its unhealing wounds curse. Now let's talk about weapons and armor. One Piece can get pretty crazy with the weapons and armor in the world, and firearms are common, so not much in the way of limitations. None of the protagonists, that is to say Luffy and his pirate crew, use heavy armor, or any armor really, but it does show up throughout the series. However, with little to no magic, magic weapons, armor, and items are going to be a problem. Now, magic items kinda sorta exist in One Piece. If you regularly feed Haki, remember that's that spiritual energy stuff, into an item, it can kind of become a pseudo-magic item eventually. So that is an option, but honestly, I'd solve this problem with the optional automatic bonus progression rules. And instead of property runes, just give players unique weapons and armor that have Haki-based abilities. These would be rare, but there is precedent for them in One Piece. One last thing. If you want to plan to have your players start with devil fruits, that's fine. I've made a devil fruit user background that I'll put on screen now. It's very heavily borrowed from the rare cursed background, but I gave it a One Piece twist. And as promised, here's a cheat sheet with all of the changes. Anyway, that's all the changes I would make to turn a Pathfinder game into a One Piece game. By the way, special thanks to Swing Ripper who helped me edit this script. But let me know if this appeals to you and if you would like to make your own One Piece Pathfinder game. I'd love to hear about it. Hey, as a reminder, I have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but honestly, it's just a way to keep this channel financially viable. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you can help me keep the lights on and buy new equipment, and I would really appreciate it. And of course, I also have a Discord channel. Drop by and say hi. And don't forget to like and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming.